All right, well, we will go ahead and get started on the second session of the evening. Just as a quick preface, this is through Launch Code that we're able to do this, and it's part of our Code with Pride campaign that we do each year during Pride Month. And it's a way for us to kind of bring pride into the tech workforce and into the tech world so that people can bring their full authentic selves to that workforce in a very valuable and authentic way. My name is Briar Kais. I am a public relations manager at LaunchCode, and I'm going to be moderating the panel. So in a moment, I'll ask the following panelists to introduce themselves, tell a little bit about themselves, and then to give their pronouns. But before we get started, I wanted to make a couple points of order that in this panel, we are going to discuss queer issues, and at that, we are going to discuss it with the open mindset of queer not being a derogatory term, which it can be to some males of a certain age that are homosexual, as well as using the umbrella term LGBTQ+ to encompass all people that are non-straight, non-cis, and allies included. So with that said, I'll go ahead and let my panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Wagner. I am the founder and CEO of a local company called Aspis Consulting. We are an IT professional services company specializing in cybersecurity, and my pronouns are he, him. I'm also on the Mid-America LGBT Chamber as their Supply Diversity Committee Chair and an advisory board member to the Pride Charitable Fund here in Kansas City.
My turn. I'm Lily Doucette, and my pronouns are she, her. I am an admin assistant at Forrest T. Jones and an aspiring tech professional. Guess I love long walks on the beach, and I love spending time with my family.
Fabulous shoes.
Oh, thank you. Fabulous shoes. And yeah. Nothing too crazy over here. Nothing too exciting. I'll pass it on to you.
I'm Rebecca Baumgartner. I'm the Senior Vice President of People and Operations at the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. Previously, I was over global diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging issues for a law firm. And I'm a certified diversity, equity, and inclusion executive.
All right, thank you all. So we are going to just kind of jump into this. And a preface to this first question. Obviously, we know that trans rights, healthcare issues, and queer visibility have been at the forefront of a lot of news stories lately and a lot of legislation. Over 400 bills have been introduced in the U.S. alone this year that attack queer people in one way or another. As I looked and did the research the other day, 29 of them had been passed in the last month alone. So with that kind of being said, and this question can go to anybody, how can legislation make or break a company's ability to hire diverse talent? This can include how Kansas City is a haven city for trans individuals, a recent decision made. But how could that inhibit the growth of a company?
Okay, well, it's actually pretty interesting because as we were talking the other day, afterwards I remembered, so I was speaking with one of the Centurions groups through our leadership program at the Chamber, and that was, one of the questions was, what are things that concern us about the future of the business landscape, of the civic landscape, and one of the things I brought up was that unfortunately, both on the Kansas and the Missouri side, our legislatures that we have voted in are making us a very, very unwelcoming place for people to be. And if they continue to do that, it is going to be hard. So we are really encouraging businesses to say, look, this is not a political issue. This is a business issue. You're not going to be able to get people to move here. You're not going to be able to get people to stay here with their families if this is not a welcoming place. So really encouraging businesses and business leaders to get their voice out there and push against some of this legislation to increase that workforce.
Yeah, as a small business owner, it certainly does me no favors trying to recruit and attract talent here in Kansas City. I'm blessed that my company is a nationwide company with more offices than just in Kansas City, but that our home base is here, our headquarters is here. I like to have the preponderance of my employees here. and not being welcoming and creating an environment where my employees can get the health care and benefits that they need is a challenge. And when I'm competing as a small business owner in a very tight market, which is we do federal contracting. Federal government contracting is the majority of our revenue. So those margins are really tight, and I have to scour the nation for really high quality people. And when they find out that we're based in Kansas or Missouri, or on the Missouri side of Kansas City, all of a sudden my candidates begin to develop a stereotype of what does that mean to be working for a company based in the middle of the country. So I will say I hope I'm not jumping ahead on you, but on the thought of legislation, I was encouraged today to hear that yesterday there was a judge in Cole County, I think, Missouri. Anyways, if you're not tracking the constitutional amendment for reproductive freedom, because I think there's a lot of, just my opinion, there's a lot of connection between the rights for women and their bodies, as well as the rights for LGBTQ plus people, trans people and their bodies. And so I was very encouraged by the language that's going to be hopefully put forth to the voters of Missouri, which includes a constitutional right to reproductive freedom is how it's phrased. And I hope that will also provide some shelter, some haven towards people or for people who have other reproductive needs that aren't just related to a woman's right to choose.
Yeah, and I think too, if we consider the workforce landscape and unemployment, we have a lower, almost a full point lower than the national unemployment average. So it is hard to find talented individuals. Companies need to be able to recruit high-level people, and it's not happening. They're not being able to do that. Because we tend to be so unwelcoming. They have this stereotype that, unfortunately, is being fed into. But we are not doing ourselves any favors by being so exclusive.
So to kind of flip the coin on that a little bit, I wanted to ask a question to Lily about when looking for jobs or the fact that you're an aspiring data professional in technology. She's not taking classes at Launch Code, but we'll forgive her for that.
Sorry.
But in looking for that, how might you look for a company that is inclusive, that does understand the value of diversity and brings that belonging to the table? What would you look for, and how would you find that?
Well, first, I think what is important is to ask questions of any prospective employers that I would have. Like we've all heard the question, what is the culture like at this company? But that's too broad, and mostly we're given a cookie cutter answer of, oh, we're like a family. But then it's like, are we a family that's like, oh, okay, we want to hang out with these guys on Christmas, or is it like the family that we don't talk about? So I think a much better question that I, recently figured out that I needed to ask was, I really am passionate about diversity and inclusivity. How does your company practice? How does your company take these ideals into mind? Are you welcoming to everybody? Are you more old-fashioned? It's a safer way to ask a company, without having to out yourself or put yourself in a vulnerable position, to seeing, do they actually value diversity and inclusivity? Do they actually have friendly policies in place that make it a welcoming place to work? Or are they just we'll just use, what we've used in the past and, just stick with that and, kind of hold people off on the cold. Ooh, there we go. So that's kind of one of the ways that I look into it. But then, I also do a lot of research. Sometimes even where a company is located helps, geographical locations, like Kansas City is Kansas City, but not everybody has the luxury to just look for jobs across the country, in more of those progressive areas. Like, I certainly don't have the luxury to just go like, I'm going to go work in California. Sometimes you just have to look locally around. So if that's what you have to resort to, then I look at the website of the company. What do they have under their values? What does their leadership look like? Is it just old white person, old white person, old white person, old white person, old white person at the top? Or is it like, okay, there's actual diversity up here? That means at the very least something's going on. That's what I look at.
Rebecca, could you please follow up on that, on ways that you could advocate to companies the value of that? We know that everything is driven by the bottom line, the value that brings, and how monetarily the investment that they make when it comes to diversity initiatives, and taking that extra stance in a volatile time might be beneficial to them in the long run.
Yeah. And first of all, the business case for diversity is a question that I get a lot, and it's things that businesses want to know. But I really want to make sure that I put out there that it is beyond time for us to move past the business case for diversity. That we're not a statistic, we're not a metric point. Diversity matters because people matter, and our companies are made of people, and their voices matter, and their stories matter. But anyways, I'm off of my soapbox. When you're kind of looking at what the ROI, the return on investment, so to speak, for diversity initiatives, there have been numerous studies that have been done on this. A lot. McKinsey and Company is one of my favorite. Russell Reynolds also does a lot of really great, and Boston Consulting Group. I continue to them coming up. They always do these amazing workplace surveys. They do these really deep dive studies. And every single one always comes back. Workplaces that are more diverse are more innovative. They're more financially successful, up to almost 40% more financially sustainable. They have higher employee engagement, less turnover. So when you're really looking, and as you look at the higher levels, because a lot of times you'll see diversity just at entry level, right? And it kind of that they fall out as they come up into leadership. But companies that have diversity at the leadership level or the board of directors level, they are 5 times more likely to outperform companies that have none. So there is true data out there that shows investing in diversity pays off. It's not nice to have. It's not frilly. And I'm not talking about, paying money to do a survey and being given a best places to work. I'm talking about really looking deep at your equitable policies, making sure you've got affinity groups and support organizations. So all of this work, yes, it's time, it's money, but it pays off in dividends.
When we talk about diversity, we're talking about not only diversity of thought, but diversity of race, ethnicity, and gender expression, gender identity, as well as sexual orientation. For anyone that's willing on the panel, if you could speak to a situation where you may not have been the most comfortable in expressing any kind of hidden diversity that you may have, because we know that there's a difference between visible identity and the inner identity of personality, and some people can have the luxury of not being out in their diverse forms. If any of you would like to speak, I'm not obviously going to out you on the panel, but if any of you have experiences or can share an experience that you've perceived in that way, what would that be?
I can say, as a trans woman, as an employee, I don't feel safe currently being out at my current workplace because they don't have any inclusive policies in place. Like, this was a hire that a job that I went after because I was in a desperate position. I was recently unemployed, and I just took the first fish that was on the hook. So it was like it's really stressful, to hide, or feel that you have to hide part of yourself, in a place that you're spending the majority of your time every single day. You're not focused on thriving at this place. You're focused on surviving. And, it's just one of those things where it's like, I know that there are several other, trans employees that I am friends with who are like, I don't know if I can speak up, at my workplace. I don't feel comfortable like being myself. I don't want to hang out with my coworkers outside of work because I do not feel that I would be safe if they got to know who I am, outside of this workplace. And I think with the current political climate, with what's going on legislatively, that adds a lot of additional pressure to it as well.
Oh, I was just going to say, and thank you for saying that. I know it's hard to kind of talk about that. So I appreciate you speaking out, and I just want to validate your experience because it does happen, right? It's hard. I remember I used to work, one of the law firms I worked at, we had offices in Georgia and in South Carolina. And people in our affinity groups were like, I could get fired because I'm gay. Like right now, and this was 2 years ago. So it is so scary for me to be out in the workplace. And I don't think that people realize the pressure that is, right? That they are constantly hiding. They're constantly concerned and afraid. And they shouldn't feel like that ever, let alone at work, right? And when you kind of think about employee engagement, the Gallup 20, so it's kind of like their landmark engagement study. A lot of the questions are, how safe do you feel in the workplace? Do you have a best friend at work? And if you can't be authentic and you can't be real, those engagement factors are going to go down. And you're so busy spending energy hiding who you are that you're not putting everything you can into the work. So your productivity goes down and just everything. And so it's real. And I wish more people heard that, and I wish more people understood that. Thank you.
We're gonna kind of switch threads for a second. Jeff, could you speak to us a bit about how you encourage people to be their full selves at work and how you kind of show them a lived experience of that?
Well, I think it starts with being my authentic self. So I'm very proudly married to a man named Charles Leap. He's an awesome guy. And, when I put forward my certification, so we are a LGBT, it's now called LGBTQ to be more inclusive, but LGBTQ business enterprise certified by the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. It's the only recognized LGBTQ plus certification for companies. We are 100% gay owned. We are Kansas City's fastest growing LGBT tech company. Also, maybe the fastest LGBT growing people. Hopefully, that's true too. 36% of our workforce are LGBTQ. 60% are female, including 60% of management positions are female. So, I mean, to me, our core values being community, diversity, and integrity, we lead with that in everything that we do. And frankly, if I encounter a client, and my staff know this too, I've told them in multiple times and even demonstrated it with choosing who I do business with, whether it's a supplier or a client, we don't work with you. If you don't like what we do, if you don't like the organizations we sponsor, and we're very active in the gay community, sponsoring quite a few 501c3s here locally, I don't need you. I don't want your money. I don't want your thing that you're trying to sell me. I'll go find another supplier or a client. You are not going to break me, and you're not going to break our company, our people, our spirit, and I'm not going to compromise on that. So I think being a bold leader and being able to put a foot down and say, this is who we are and this is what we're doing, this is how we're engaging our community, this is how we gauge our employees, our clients, and our suppliers, and just being there's no question, there's no gray area, is really what people in executive management need to do.
Kind of along that line, and this can be to anybody on the panel, we know that discomfort when it comes to either working with clients or working with vendors or different relationships that you have professionally, or whether it's contacts, anybody that you encounter that shows that they are exclusive, like non-inclusive, non-diverse, supporting, whether it's anti-gay, anti-trans, racist, any kind of nomener like that. can we speak specifically to how that degrades relationships over time and reduces the longevity of those relationships? So, for example, an employee that doesn't feel safe at their workplace isn't going to invest time in the professional development. I would love to talk a little bit about that and how you feel.
That was a lot of question. That's okay though. Let me try taking a stab at it. So, I think when you compromise your values and you don't demonstrate support to your employees, it begins, to your point, to erode those relationships. And I need, as any business does, it's a competitive advantage to have. That's one of the things that I wanted to say to you, Rebecca, is like, I'm totally with you. It's not just about ROI. The reason everybody does it is because it's a competitive advantage, right? Like, we know if we have a diverse workforce, we're going to beat somebody at getting the next, contract or the next opportunity. So, and there's a lot of truth in that. So, back to the employees and relationships, if they don't feel safe, and I'm sorry, I hope that you feel safe at your work, but if they don't feel safe, they're not going to be your competitive advantage anymore. And in a service-oriented marketplace like we are, that we need our people are our product. At least at my company, our people are our product. We sell brain power is what we sell, and we need them to be fully engaged at work. We need them to be educated, and as well as lifelong learners. We support that, but it's a two-way street. We can put that out there, but the person also has to want to learn. And if they don't feel like they can survive the workday, because even if it's the term is microaggression, but even if it's small things that happen in the workplace, it just deteriorates I think any business's ability to perform and deliver for its customers. So I hope that was close. Okay.
Well, thank you again for being a leader, when it comes to business leadership and focusing on inclusivity. I think that's a lot that we need to see. So as someone who doesn't really feel safe in their workplace, I can say that, my relationship with my employer is it's frayed. It's like I'm just doing, I wouldn't say the bare minimum. I don't like doing the bare minimum, but, I could always do more, but I'm not focused on that. For example, I'm afraid to go into the office without makeup on. I know I look good, but it's still, it's still just an anxiety that I have, that it's like, oh, the one day I go in without makeup, someone's going to be like with a magnifying glass and, potentially put my career at risk. And, so I think kind of focusing, going back onto the earlier points that we've all discussed is if the employees are focusing just on trying to get through the workday safe, without that actual security and comfort of the company, be like, hey, it's okay, we're all good with that, we're not wanting to be like, oh, let's push that bottom line. It's, oh God, I hope I make it to that bottom line, but yeah, I think that's just kind of where my points are with that for sure.
Well, I think that a lot of times when we talk about businesses increasing their diversity, we focus a lot on hiring. We focus a lot on recruiting. But, diversity is just a measurement. It's a metric. It's a number of people out of another group of people. It's important to focus on the inclusion piece, right? Because if you don't have inclusive policies, if you don't have safe workplaces, it doesn't matter how many people you bring in, they're going to leave. And, especially with the younger workforces coming up, they are a lot more socially conscious. They are looking for that, kind of to your point, they do their research. They look to see, who on your board is of color. Who do you what kind of other organizations do you represent? Do you sponsor? They're going to look at that and they're going to ask questions. They're going to see how high diversity, equity, inclusion is placed on your website. that really kind of shows a lot of what your true commitment is. I think we've all seen, after the murder of George Floyd, all those companies put those black squares, Black Lives Matter, and that's it. There was nothing else that was done. And it's a very toxic form of performative allyship. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen companies that I know from experience are not inclusive that put up those things. They put up social media posts about Pride Month and how they support the LGBTQ community. And I'm like, no, you don't. And people know that and they feel that. And your employees are your brand ambassadors. They are out there, right? Like, I highly doubt you're going to be, walking around telling people how great your company is. And if they have any financial needs, you should go to my company and I know the best person for you. That's not going to happen because you don't feel that personal connection, because you don't feel included.
Can I just foot stomp one more thing to the business leaders that might be listening in the audience, that it's really, is that okay? Yes. No, that
it's your world, Jeff. We're just here.
I think it's really important to remember that to me, diversity is the blessing that we're all different. And so I can come from a life experience. I can come from, an education background, a certain gender, sexuality, and I can have a complete, excuse my French, F you attitude towards somebody who disagrees with me. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody has lived that same life experience that enables them to have that attitude. And I think business leaders need to realize that creating a diverse workplace and fostering those relationships means making it a place where the allyship is encouraged, those that can't speak for themselves, that there is advocates to speak for them, and that we are perceptive to how other people are interacting in our business environment so that we can help them be the best possible employee. And ultimately, if we're focused on business outcomes, we can be the best business we can be.
I'm sorry, and then to add like just a quick little thing, kind of like from an employee standpoint, because I think something that business leaders or business owners and everyone just needs to be aware of is also the word of mouth. Like I've worked at companies who weren't inclusive, and I've had friends who are like, gosh, I kind of need a job. Is your company hiring? I'm like, yeah, only if you're really prepared to put yourself into a tiny little box.
If you're an old white man, yes.
Right, if you're an old white man, yes, this is perfect for you. It's like even with this company, for example, my department is really hurting to have extra support. And I had a friend who, I adore and trust, who was like, hey, is your company hiring? I was like, they are, but here's the downside is just be kind of prepared to if you do go for this job, just be prepared to kind of be in the closet, while you're here, because I don't think, they're going to look favorably upon us making the place, brighter, as it were, So I just think that's another important factor to bring in, is that can also impact a company's relationships, not just with internally, but also externally as well. People aren't going to want to work at a place that they've heard bad things about.
No, I really do like that thread. I would like to kind of dial in and help people that aren't from a various diverse background. I'm assuming there are still cis, straight, white people that exist in the world. How could they perform as valuable allies in a situation where they are in a position of privilege or in a position of power, or maybe it's even a lateral peer situation? How could they become a non-performative ally, but an authentic ally with integrity?
I think a big piece of it is, working to normalize, right? The things that have a stigma attached to it, really working to normalize. I remember, and I wasn't there, but this is an anecdote that I heard from, one of my recruiting managers. And there was a panel interview, because we always like to try and have panel interviews, diverse panel interviews, so that when people come in, they're more likely to see somebody like them working there, right? And they feel a little bit more connected. But, somebody had just kind of now that I recommend this, because like from a strictly HR perspective, you really need to keep it like to the job, right? Like it doesn't matter if they're married, if they have kids, kind of keep that out of the conversation. But sometimes, if it slips out, it happens. And so, one of the hiring managers, said, hey, tell me, do you have a wife? And she's like, it was so great. Before I could say anything, another hiring manager said, or husband, or partner, or whatever. And so I think that's the kind of low key, understated thing. Not jumping in and making this huge, big deal, but finding those small ways to say, hey, you know what? We're here. We see you. This is safe, and I'm here, and I support you, no matter who you love, no matter what you look like, no matter what color you are. So I think it's really those small things and leading by example and being inclusive.
I have just a short story. Last year, we decided to celebrate Juneteenth and give it as a paid holiday to our full-time employees. And we do every year now. It's built into our policies. That is not something that every company that I interact with does. But I think that it's the right thing to do, and we are able to do it for our employees. So the story comes last year on this first time that we're celebrating Juneteenth with our employees. And I have two 25-year-old marketing people up in northern Minnesota, 25-ish, maybe one's 24 and one's 28, it doesn't matter for the story. They're both white, that's the important thing. And we have a very diverse workforce. We have, like I said, 36% LGBT. We have, I think we're around 40% minority, most of who are African American. And so these two 25-year-old white kids are, and I'm 44, so I guess I can call them white kids, are pumping out this Juneteenth social media graphic, and I get the first version, and I'm like, what is wrong with you guys? Did you produce this in a vacuum? Because they did. It was clear. It wasn't that it was inappropriate, but definitely did not hit on the point of the day. And I said, do you work alone? We have 18 employees. Our company's not huge, right? But we have 18 employees, and 40% of them are African American. Call your neighbor and run this by them before you embarrass me on social media. They got the message, and they did that this year without asking. But it turned into a much better product. Again, it goes to the diversity of thought. Like, just don't sit in your little, as a cisgender person or a somebody who's in the majority, white, male or female. Don't just presume, don't assume, don't just go off and think that your only way of thinking that you've been in for 25 or 50, even 50 years or however long you've been on the planet. There's nothing wrong with asking your friend, your colleague, hey, the boss asked us to put this together. You've lived this experience. Can you please provide me some input so we can make sure that this is the best thing for the company, the best thing for our business?
Okay, two things on this, and I'm jumping in, and I don't want to get off track, but that is a prime example of individualism, which is a white supremacy norm, right? That we have to do it ourselves, right? That we value this rugged individualism that's a myth in American society, that we know best. If we ask for help, or if we ask somebody to look at something, it's a weakness. And that is something that really prohibits, diversity of thought, right? I mean, like, you would think it makes perfect sense to collaborate with a person of color and say, hey, look, this impacts you. I want your experience. I want your eyes on it. But again, it's that fear of, being weak and being seen as weak that does it. And then recently, and I'm sorry if anybody here works or likes Ingram's magazine, but they recently put out their 40 under 40, right? And I saw this picture on social media, and they were like, 40 under 40, look at these amazing people. And I put them on blast on social media, and I got a little bit of flack. But I'm like, seriously, guys, you cannot find anybody of color that's a good person under 40. I mean, like, there's a lot. I have like 10 in my phone that I can tell you about right now, not a single person. So it tells you that either there were no people of color in the decision-making room. There was nobody looking at this picture after they took it and be like, wow, that's a lot of white. Or they were there and they didn't feel safe to say anything. They didn't feel safe to say, hey, look, this is a problem. This is not representative of our business leader community. And, second of all, you can be fabulous after 40. I'm just saying, you can be fabulous after 40. It's possible. Your life doesn't end. So that's it. But you can tell the companies, and there's so many others. Dove got into trouble with that a long time ago. I think H&M and Old Navy got in trouble with that a long time ago. But it's because A, they don't have anybody with that diversity or thought, or they don't feel psychologically safe to speak up and say something. That's it. Okay, my next soapbox, I'm done.
Kind of to add just a little bit on there is I cannot accentuate enough the importance of speaking up. Like, the time for education is always like, you can always educate yourself on the minority communities that you may or may not be exposed to. So like researching, like how, like for example, with the Juneteenth story, kind of like, is this gonna make me look like the dumb white person who didn't speak to anybody outside of myself? Or, like, are you gonna actually branch out and talk to other people? But, so education, always a good thing. But then I now cannot stress enough, during these times especially, speaking up, being vocal, even if it's in a polite way, because, I don't want any, no one should lose their jobs for speaking up. So try not to, burn the building down, tempting as it might be. Just like, if you see something where someone is being bullied or, marginalized, thank you, say something. It's like we've now gone past the point where, politeness, in the workplace still has to be a thing, but just sitting back and hoping somebody else says something is not going to cut it anymore. We've gone beyond that point. So, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
So one thing I wanted to kind of cap it off at, and we will take questions here in a minute. But Rebecca, I know that you are a wealth of resources when it comes to how businesses can look to other examples. Obviously, Jeff, you have the lived experience, but how can people find more quality research, data, understanding, resources in order to put forth valuable diversity initiatives, but then also whether it's the hiring or it's the retaining of talent and helping them to feel included with that diversity aspect?
There was, first of all, is to get a good understanding of what the landscape looks like, right? So looking at organizations that do these studies, like the McKinsey, like Boston Consulting Group and Russell Reynolds, they do a lot of surveys and studies into diversity in the workforce. What works, what doesn't, what are some options that you can use. But if you're really looking to do something internally, you're wanting to bolster your diversity initiatives, you're wanting to improve equity and inclusion, you've got to talk to your people. It always begins with an assessment. What matters to them? What's important to them? What are your gaps? Where do people feel included and where they don't? And I think another really big important first step too is to do a policy audit. We talk about equity at work. A lot of times we think about pay equity, right? But it's so much more. What policies do you have in your workplace? Are they accessible to people? What about the decision-making process behind those policies? For example, if you have a remote work policy before COVID, you had a remote work policy and it required the approval of your supervisor. Well, who oversees that? Who makes sure that their final decision isn't biased somehow? What are we doing to make sure that it's consistent and equitable? There's so many different things, but it always begins with an internal assessment and then seeking out additional resources, whether that's people in your community. I'm more than happy to help guide that, or reaching out to a professional third party to come in and assist with that as well.
I think one thing that a lot of folks might not know, unless you live in a larger city like the size of Kansas City, St. Louis, is that there are also, besides the Casey Chamber, which is wonderful, and we're a member of the Casey Chamber.
Thank you very much.
And the Chamber provides a lot of resources to businesses, large and small. There are also diverse chambers. In I can only speak for Kansas City. So, of course, I'm very involved with the Mid-America LGBT Chamber, but there's also a Heartland Black Chamber. There's the Hispanic Chamber. There's the Asian Pacific Islander Chamber. And there is an amazing network of people who many people don't even know that there is people who day to day, and at least I connect with them on the supplier diversity side versus the DEI side, but on the supplier diversity side, they are working day in and day out to connect diverse suppliers like us to diverse workers, to large companies who are interested in doing business with us. KC SourceLink is involved. The Small Business Development Council at UMKC is involved. Apex, which used to be called PTAC. All of these people, and the KC Chamber is involved as well. Vicki participates. And we all pool our resources, some paid, some volunteer, and we help push forward diversity in our community. So just know that that's out there, and that if the Greater Kansas City Chamber can't help you with a particular DEI support structure, that one of these other diverse chambers may be able to help you.
Well, and I will also say, just really quick, and since you've mentioned the KC Chamber, just a quick plug. There's a lot of work that we do to increase and support diverse communities. Vicki also, I don't know if you know this, Vicki also is heading up our access to capital work, which is working with banking and lending institutions to create more opportunities for generational wealth and loans for people in marginalized communities, people who don't necessarily have access to those funds and don't have that privilege of banking relationships, as well as Project Lead, which is something that I'm working on, and it's really data-focused actions that our large business partners can take to increase diversity in the leadership levels of their business. So there are supports out there. Yes, your business or organization may not be right for access to capital or Project Lead, but there are other ways that we and other networks can help.
I think we may have taken all of our time. Do we have any time for questions? Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience? We covered everything. We fixed the problem. That's great.
Slap that easy
The
button.
world
right
is
there.
cured.